Hello. I'm about to start, everyone. So hi, my name is Taylor, and I'm excited to read this introduction to y'all for Scratch. In 2016, Scratch, E. Jane, and Chukwumaa, aka MHYSA and Lord Knows, sound and performance art collaborative project, suppose their listener to be a fugitive crawling through the night, and having a fever dream. The presence of this unnamed fugitive actually meanders throughout their discography, but I hear it, and it is distinctively black, threatening to glitching, downpouring harmonies, gently muttering, a Negro spiritual, vulnerable, and crying in the club. Hennessy Youngman, one of Scratch's many influences, says, "Art's not about making a sculpture out of scratch. I mean, where do you even find Scratch in 2011? I thought we ran out of Scratch. Evidently, there is no from scratch material. Scratch uses the internet they grew up on like a garden, addressing the weeds and the fruits it yields, and employing the images and sounds they find. Scratch pulls from a rich catalog of hip-hop, R&B, soul, and other genres with black roots. These inspirations are credited in the comprehensive track list for each mix from Doom Is No Excuse, Scratch's monthly show on NTS Radio. They have also released mixes for Halcyon Vale, The Fader, and Truants. This vast range of sources honors their lineage and also confronts the systemic violences, conditions, and dynamics that frame the persistent shifting of urban environments and digital landscapes. Since 2013 in DC, and now working out of Brooklyn, E. Jane, a Black American, and Chukwumaa, a Black Nigerian, have used Scratch as a space to be reflective and thoughtful about their ability to listen and hear each other while their ancestry is split across an ocean and divided by centuries. This truth contextualizes their work, and specifically their 2019 performance here in Philadelphia, Tower of Babel, for the Institute of Contemporary Art of Philadelphia at the Church of the Holy Apostles. Both collaborators received MFAs from University of Pennsylvania School of Design, now the Weitzman School of Design, in interdisciplinary art in 2016. They've performed at The Kitchen, Mokata, and MoMA PS1, New York, Rewire, Netherlands, and Les Jourdains, Switzerland. For almost a decade, themes of Black intergenerational trauma across the diaspora and intra-communication are continuously present in their work. For their upcoming performance on December 3rd at Artist Space in New York, Scratch and photographer El Perez will activate sonic sculptures across 3 nights of aleatory sound, movement, and interactive video drawing on the choreography of pre-fight scenes and a selection of reality TV shows. I hope I have made it clear that Scratch is considering Black futurity and the possibility of it, rather than pigeonholing them as identity artists, as E. Jane defines in Nope, a manifesto. With this distinguishment, I mean to decenter colonial gaze. I mean to not directly address it at all, but instead highlight their Afro-pessimist impulses, an intellectual framework that, yes, was defined by Frank Wilderson, the award-winning American writer and poet, and an armed anti-apartheid organizer, but it mirrors a Black ancestral interior knowing that we are experiencing ontological death. Scratch says, We laugh at the futility of communicating our humanity to others. We express all of this through our birthright, sound. Music makes the frustration sweet. So please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for that beautiful introduction.
Yeah, thanks. Oh my God, you got the reference for like our name. Yeah, where are you gonna find Scratch?
And thank you so much, everyone, for having us here. It's great to be back in this auditorium.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do y'all still do lightning lectures? Is that a thing? Okay, this is gonna be a little bit longer than. Okay. All right. Got an intro, so we can just
Yeah.
go in. Yeah. So this is Scratch number 1. What do I say first? We titled almost all our work just by a numbering system for like the first few years. So yeah, this is literally the first work we did together. We were independently curated into a performance festival in DC, and I think you did not want to perform in person.
I panicked. I mostly liked working with performance for video, so
Right.
It was a performance festival where we had to perform live. And so I was like, will you help me?
Yeah, and I was having a crisis because I'd just been like gigging performance art. If you can believe this, I was paying my rent exclusively with performance pieces for like 6 months. So I did not know what I was gonna do on my own. And we just approached each other and said, what if we just do something together? And that became this work.
Had a score.
Yeah, and so from the very beginning, we had scores, we had sound, we had kind of obscuration, like we had issues with visibility from the beginning.
Really quickly, raise your hand if you know what a score is. Okay, great. Awesome.
It's very old school.
Do you want to give a brief for whoever doesn't?
So if you don't know, from kind of the early history of performance art, a lot of performance artists operate from a score, which is somewhat referencing a musical score, but also seen as like a set of directions or like incident-based or conditional-based like instructions. And so we liked that a lot as people who like came out of like sort of culturally stringent environments. It's like, oh, okay, directions, okay. And we're like drama kids at heart and originally. So a lot of our work kind of has a underlying score that builds in a lot of improvisation. Yeah, so I'm just gonna skip past this. I do wanna point out this lenticular sheet as something that really excited us at the beginning of our career, but we just kind of, in the process of moving to Philly for grad school, misplaced it and then never worked with these again until a little bit later.
So this performance is something that we did while we were still here at Penn at the kitchen in 2015. It was an absurdist game of tic-tac-toe that involved live electronic music, drawing, a minimal light installation, a CCTV projection, and a live online broadcast. The set was lit by ultraviolet light with us positioned across from one another at the foot of a large CCTV projection. The projection was of a piece of paper on which we were playing what began as a conventional game of tic-tac-toe, but then sort of spirals out. Basically, sort of trying to communicate the way communication can spiral out. And that kind of also cites the piece that Chukwu mentioned before, which was also sort of a game of communication where the objects that I was layering up were meant to be communicating with the sounds he was creating. So in this one, instead of objects, we're both communicating with sound and also these marks on the board, but slowly like losing the connection to one another as time goes on.
It's anarchy down here and I'm living it. What's up?
Yeah, that was just a kind of much shorter snippet from the opening of, well, both the opening of a large event, but our performance from this event that we curated called Dense. Also, while we were here.
Right after we left.
Right after we left, but while we were here, we were throwing a party and performance art event. It was a little bit of a lot of things at Dalek Paradise at first, and then it became roving, called ATM, which was short for At the Moment. And this was the opening set of an event that we were brought in to do at PS1. I don't remember exactly how we started it all. But yeah, we were brought in to do it, and we decided to curate like a large event with dancers, DJs, performance works. Am I missing anything? I think.
Basically, so we were working with a collective of 2 other DJs, and one person that did performance as well, and so we all collectively collaborated it.
Yeah, exactly, we collectively collected,
curated
and collaborated, and curated.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was the opening set, and in this piece, we sort of, this was more so a chance to present a way that we DJ'd, that we developed in this this party in a slightly, I'm going to use the word art context.
Along with these video collages that I would make for the party, and then later stopped making for the party because parties don't really work well with live visuals. It's kind of distracting in the dark, but it was fun for this large-scale event at the Dome, the Volkswagen Dome they used to have at PS1, if anyone
Rest
remembers
in peace
that.
to the Dome. Yeah, it's not there anymore. But yeah, so this was a bit, we started this as a kind of more Dadaist or, like Fluxus-inspired collaboration. But somewhere along the way, we decided to stop kind of holding back, I guess, more accessible elements, if you will. Like we started like performing in the club contexts. We started kind of doing this hybrid DJ style that was part like music concrete, essentially, along with like dance music.
Which in some ways is also very Dada, because Dada also started in a club, like a cabaret.
Yeah, it started in cabaret, but like these. So it kind of made sense to us in a lot of ways. But yeah, we still prefer to just perform these things in clubs. We don't really like doing our DJ sets for people sitting down in a gallery.
So Tower of Babel is a piece that we've performed 3 times. The first time we performed it was at Icebox Project Space, and that's sort of what the piece was commissioned for. The second time was at the Church of Holy Apostles in West Philly, and then the third time was in Lausanne, Switzerland. It's a series of aleatory compositions for electronic instruments with 3-channel video projection, improvised movement, and a sound sculpture. In the projection, we collage video clips ripped from YouTube to display people of the Black diaspora in abstracted environments, conversing with one another or at the camera in a myriad of ways, in rap battles, hand games, conferences, news broadcasts, and sermons. The footage is slowed down or sped up so that they appear to be glitching or dancing on a loop. Another key element of Tower of Babel is a wand-like sculpture that broadcasts a drone-like tone to the sound system via a Bluetooth-enabled phone. The movements we engage involve triggering and manipulating sounds from our instruments at 2 respective stages and manipulating the tone by moving the wand throughout and beyond the space until we find areas where the Bluetooth signal is interrupted. The overall composition of Tower of Babel is the combined sound of us playing our instruments along with the tone oscillating between choppy and clear based on our movements with the sculpture. In the final iteration of Tower of Babel at Leserband's Art Festival in Switzerland, we presented the environment objects for a performance as an audiovisual installation for the first time, activating the installation each evening of the festival. This new development allowed the viewer to spend time with the installation during the day and meditate on the projections, the sound, and the sound sculpture itself, as well as the way the electronic instruments were installed.
Like we mentioned, we use scores. This is a slightly more recent one for a piece that's actually still evolving, still in process. But I'll show a little bit of one of the iterations. This is a similar but different sculpture with a Bluetooth element and sound. So the score that you saw was for scratch number 14. That originally took place at Delhi Gallery, which was in Brooklyn at the time. And it was a work where we tried to, I guess, process a confluence of separate but related events that were kind of at the top of, a lot of news feeds and like headlines at the time, including like ICE enforcement, both on its like intended targets, but for us, we also started thinking about its unintended targets, and at the same time, we were trying to think through kind of some of the impacts of global warming that we had experienced, but couldn't quite conceptualize. We couldn't make sense of the scale on which they were happening. The little clip I showed you was footage of a glacier the size of Manhattan disappearing in under an hour. So it had been in place since, I guess, before humans had any chance to have an impact on it. But it disappeared in an hour. So this work also involved a pole, Bluetooth, and what have you. And we sampled that sound from that ice shelf calving. We sampled a few songs that kind of spoke to issues that we kind of saw meeting themselves in those songs. Not literally about ice, not literally about borders, but still talking about walls, still talking about being frozen out. And that work evolved into Unbound, which was a piece that we did at VCU at the invitation of Jeremy Toussaint Baptiste to open his double exhibition that he had there and at a gallery close by. So I'm gonna play that in its entirety. So, like I said, Unbound uses the same wand-like sculpture that broadcasts sound to a sound system via Bluetooth-enabled phone. This time we played the sound piece we constructed through Bluetooth and had it connected to a sound system and a car, like a car subwoofer sculpture created by Jeremy Toussaint Baptiste. The sound piece incorporates samples from the internet, including the recording of the sound of Jacob's Haven Glacier breaking off and sinking into the ocean in Greenland. Mournful vocalizations from the 2000s breakup song Icebox by Omarion, and lyrics concerning subjugation and a metaphorical wall from Erykah Badu's 20 Feet Tall. We take turns jumping over the pole as a symbolic border. We developed a performance piece responding to the concurrent realities of global warming and the actions of U.S. immigrations and customs enforcement agents.
Just to talk a bit about some of the stuff that chukwumaa mentioned about the incidental victims of ICE. We were looking specifically at how African Americans and Nigerian immigrants were being targeted, and other people that maybe did have American citizenship, but because of like petty marijuana crimes or something ended up in the system and then ended up accused of being illegal immigrants, and people that were trying to be kicked out that were Black, basically. And even recently, we were doing a residency at the Center for Afrofuturist Studies in Iowa, and we found some really interesting research that we're still really working through about how there was a law during slavery about immigrants and sort of like the rights of immigrants, and it's kind of like very similar to the way the rights of slaves worked, where basically like if the mother was a slave and the father was a free man or like a white man, the child was a slave. So it's the same thing with immigrants. So we're still working out all of these weird things, but it basically became this, I don't know, this weird way of understanding that these issues that are immigrant issues are still Black issues.
Yeah, like domestic
Black
in a
issues.
way. Yeah, and these
And then,
questions.
sorry, one
What's
more.
the questions?
The questions were back, but actually I want to just to. And specifically this case where the ICE agents were shining flashlights into people's houses who had turned their lights off to pretend they weren't home to hide was like really impactful for the use of flashlights. Because that was just such a surreal thing to read about in the news, like people literally being hunted. So just wanted to not play a glacier again.
Yeah.
So those are the questions.
Yeah, and in a way, these questions like find themselves in our process outside of just this piece. Like we whether or not we're intentionally asking it. A lot of our performance works really do ask these questions, like of ourselves. We don't really seek the answer outside of the performances. I don't know how to really put that, but we're not pointing this question outward. These are sort of our performances are sort of the ways that we answer these questions. And that was a recent one that really had a kind of a epic scale, as well as a scale that was, I don't know if unseen is the word. There was a way that we felt at a certain height of discourse around ICE that there was a very narrow focus on who might be in danger or who might actually have to worry about the negative impacts. And I think a similar
Maybe we'll stop there.
Yeah, we're gonna keep moving. But there were a couple works that we also thought about when we were working on number 14 and Unbound and this research that's ongoing. This one photograph by Marilyn Nance that we came across at Greater New York really spoke to us. about like a kind of a fugitive approach to like barriers and boundaries.
It was also really poignant at the time that it was shown because there were recent protests at the time in New York where kids had been jumping turnstiles
Like
to refuse the fare.
Yeah, there were like mass turnstile jumping. I don't know if I could call them events because it was just like if you're commuting, instead of swiping, just jump them. But yeah, so this kind of spoke to that. This photo spoke to the moment that we were seeing it and to this past moment that it was taking place. And then, of course, a really big one for us that we come back to a lot is David Hammond's Concerto in Black and Blue. Well, I can't speak for you, but I don't think either of us were able to see it in person. But the lore behind it and the idea around it was really big to us. This work consisted entirely of blue keychain lights handed out to the visitors of the gallery. That was it. So your experience of this piece was you moving through this dark space illuminated by this small light and coming across whoever else might be in the gallery, which also touched on the formal kind of aspect of this hunting, this light-based hunting that marked a lot of ICE raid stories for us. So yeah, just want to take a second, point that out.
This piece was done in collaboration with Basil Abbas and Ruan Aburam for their solo show at MoMA in the spring of 2022. We were invited to engage a web-based archive of social media video clips they had created of people from the Middle East engaged in acts of dance, singing, and protest, and create a performance in response. We designed a 4-channel projection for their installation that incorporated footage from the archive and a screen recording of the archive based on tags that resonated with our practice. We also sampled the video clips and combined these sounds with songs we grew up with that we felt were in conversation with the folk songs sung in the clips we chose. So an example of that was this Baltimore song, Dance My Pain Away, that we played along with some protest songs of theirs. For the musical component of our performance, we manipulated these samples live along with sounds from live electronic instruments. The piece is actually named after lyrics from one of these dirges that were sung in the archive, and it's called The Heart is Troubled When I Remember Them. When I remember them, I am the one full of passion. So here's some images of this piece. And then this piece we did this summer while we were studying at Skowhegan, along with Lexi, somewhere in the audience. And I'll press play before I talk. So unlike a lot of our pieces that do use scores, or where we sort of like have an intention in mind ahead of time, this piece, really the materials that we use sort of guided our actions. So basically it was like everyone was invited to do performances, and we had these lenticular lenses. I had a vocal effects processor, a synthesized, a Mother 32 synth, and then chukwumaa, what did you have? Sorry.
And that one, I think I just brought something called a no input mixer. It's just a mixer with all of the outputs plugged back into the inputs. Yeah.
And it was on the 4th of July, so I feel like also the 4th of July really was the score, because it's like, how do you, I mean, it's really weird. Maine is the most northern state in America, and
On that coast.
on the east coast, at least. And beyond that's Canada. And I think this weird thing happened for me being a slave descendant, where I was like, wow, like this is the northest you can get. Like this must be the closest I'll ever touch freedom. And wow, was I wrong? Like, I mean, like Maine is, no, not free. America's stressful. And I think being on the 4th of July, reflecting all of that, it was sort of like language can't begin to explain the frustration we have, sort of like being in this space and reaching to the farthest end of the country and nothing really being what it should be or what it was promised. So yeah, that's what that piece is about. And then lenticular lenses are back, which we found that summer conveniently.
Yeah, it's like they found us, really. We went dumpstering while we were up there.
And they come back again in this piece that we're working on at Artist Space. So we've had 2 performances thus far. In this piece, we're sort of like turning these sculptural objects with the lenticular lenses into instruments themselves. And so there are no instruments in the space aside from these pedals that are connected to contact mics that are hooked up to the sculptures that we are playing live, while enacting these pre-fight scene choreographies. So if anyone watches reality TV, all the moments before the fight breaks out, all the tension that's built up, these are sort of the moments we sort of like wanted to cathartically act out. And we also had 4 channels of video where we had these like godlike shots, kind of like in reality TV, where it pulls back and you can see the cameraman and all of that. I wanted 3 shots like that, and then we had a tied up shot that El Perez provided, who was also our collaborator, and also engaged in the performance with us. And we sort of told El, just like, be like a cameraman that has to get the shot and has to get the action. El did a great job of that. In this shot, you can see I'm actually playing, every time we moved this bar, it made sound. And we had what's the name of that pedal?
It's some sort of like voice transformer or something.
So every time
like
we
auto-tune.
moved, it basically made this like really beautiful like melodic key sound. And like as you played up and down, you can like hear it change notes. It's super fun. And then what else? Oh, and we also made a full installation that you can check out, and we painted the windows blue. So you sort of like have this like feeling of being like encompassed by this space. And there's also a monitor outside of the gallery that kind of shows what's happening in the multi-channel views, and I could control it. Oh, that's also a fun part. There's a video switcher, so at any given time, I could go over and change the view of the camera. And so that's something that actually the reality TV participants don't actually have the agency to do, but I thought it would be fun to sort of like enact this agency in this like really weird system. And it's kind of about how, like, you know how like we're like, oh wow, like we're all really stressed and anxious and like why? And it's like, well, in reality TV, people are fighting. It's like, why are they fighting? And it's like, they're fighting because these cameras are in their face all the time. And maybe we're all stressed and anxious because the economy is collapsing. So sort of like the what are the cameras in our lives making everything harder? And yeah, that's why we'll stop and take questions.
Please don't ask an overthought question. Ask me something really, really basic. Don't be, please. I just want to preempt that.
In the back.
I have a two-part question. One, was there like a process or part of like external entertainment that both of you engage with reality TV in general before you got here, which I assume yes? And two, are there like specific shows that you were kind of looking to?
Wait, what was the first part? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, like, I know some people are like really into reality TV, almost they have like a practice or like a part of a watching experience that they relate to as like a viewer, and so I was wondering if you had any like process related to watching shows, and if so, also like what are the specific shows?
Yeah. Yes. So Real Housewives of Atlanta, Real Housewives of Potomac, Bad Boys Club, Jocelyn's Cabaret.
Cutting it in the ATL.
Which is a deep cut.
Very deep cut.
Very good, though.
Only one season, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's great to watch while you behave well in real life. Watching other people not and behave badly can be very cathartic.
Yeah, let them freak out. Like, let them respond to that validly, like, inappropriate thing someone said or did in a inappropriate way.
But also on a more serious note, I also, I like them as a space to find empathy, specifically for Black women that people generally don't have empathy for. Like, for example, in Real Housewives of Potomac, there are two women get into a fight, and one of the women is treated really badly about the fight, but then she talks to her pastor, and her pastor talks about her childhood and how she has all this trauma that she was like negotiating in that moment, and how it like came up in the fight. I thought that was like really poignant, and I'm like, I always want to slow down and be like, wait, can we focus on that part? Can we focus on how they're like deeply traumatized, and like these shows are exploiting them? So there's also a bit of that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we come across when we're watching reality TV that literally we don't see anywhere. Sometimes we're watching it and we're like, this is video art. This is what just happened. That was video art, or this is a type of cultural study that someone should be doing somewhere else, and this is the only place it's happening. And that usually gets glossed over for the fights or glossed over for the spectacle.
These wings are actually based on wings that someone wears in a fight, where she says back in her day, people would dance at you when they got into a fight. And so she wears these wings into a club and she starts dancing at a woman who throws a drink in her face. And I was just like, is that true? She's also in Atlanta, so I'm like, is this like, I don't, like, yeah, like they're basically doing like anthropological work at that point.
Yeah, there's literally like elements where we see like discussion of history that isn't being discussed in any university, not being discussed in any books that we come across, like, and we're like, we go to look for it after they've mentioned it in this like primary source kind of way, and it's not there. So yeah, there's a lot that we get out of reality TV. This is like a tiny drop. Yeah.
For your sound compositions, when you're actively performing those live, is any of that premeditated or rehearsed, or is it purely improvisational, or a mix between the two?
So sometimes we'll have elements that are pre-recorded, but and we do practice. Sometimes we practice just by performing. So I guess it's a mix of the two, because we'll kind of know what the machines can do, what sounds we like, but then we're improvising live what they're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's where the score thing for us is very important, because and we use the word aleatory a lot, like borrowing that from the music space, particularly jazz, new music, and I guess contemporary and post-classical, because there's a very long tradition of both planning and planning to improvise, like at the same time or built in. So we try to respond to that. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. So nice to have you back. I didn't know that story about the first time you collaborated. And it makes me, I guess, curious to just hear now, after so many years have passed of collaborating, like where or how Scratch sits in the whole trajectory of what you each do. Like how, I guess in some ways it's like, maybe, I'm sure there's a lot to say, but just to reflect a little bit on what the collaboration is for you now, how it's changed, how Scratch sort of is held in the breadth of what you both do.
I can start. So one of the things I really love about this collaboration is that it allows us to think about things that maybe are of interest to us, but maybe don't make as much sense in our individual practices, or sort of like, you know, like you're in a flow with your individual practice, you're following threads, you're moving in a straight line, but then there are all these other things you pick up that you don't want to necessarily throw away. And so Scratch is, I think, a place where I know that I sort of like put those things to not muddy up what I'm doing in my solo work.
Yeah, I was gonna say that we like using. I'm just gonna say it. We didn't show anything that Scratch did while we were here, like as students. We only showed our individual work because it was like this kind of safe place we could just do something without questioning it or like second guessing it 3 times before we made a move. And it let us actually try things that we gave ourselves a chance to trust it, like up front instead of like after, like, you know, 1,000 people had told us, oh, that's a good idea. And it was healthy for us to have both spaces.
And it's still a space for experimentation, I think,
oh, definitely,
too.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's how Scratch works for us a lot.
There's a lot less language around Scratch, and I think our individual work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fantastic having you both back. I guess I'm first of all, I want to compliment you both because what really I find deeply affecting is how in sync you two are with each other. I mean, it's really quite amazing. It's like, you know, it's like you're finishing each other's sentences or thoughts, and even when you disagree, it leads to a higher plane or something like that. And that's rare. So I think that's quite, I mean, it's just that, like putting a new definition on working together. It's like this perfect blend. So I guess that thought led to this question, which is, have you ever had situations whereby one of you is ill or away for a while, and you had a deadline to do a project, but what happens in those types of situations where you can't rely on the other person being there so much?
Yes.
It's never happened before. Yeah, no. Luckily, we generally get sick at the same time, and so we get better at the same time. Truly honest. If one of us isn't feeling as well as the other knows how to, like, I think, pick up the other's slack. Like, I had a headache today, so, you know, I was like, can you do 60% and I do 40? So that'll happen. But I think we trust each other, and we also know what the other wants. So it's like, if you don't have the energy to say it, I'm still thinking about what you need and what you want out of this work.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's inside the work on the front end, like where y'all can see it. Like if you come to a performance, like that's a lot of how we work together. It feels weird because I think this is an issue with a lot of the ways that the visual art space works. It's like none of you no one here that is a visual artist or isn't a visual artist but is still in the visual arts is a single person. I don't know how to say this. Like, you don't put up an art show by yourself. You don't talk about art by yourself. There's not really, of course there are parts of it that you can be by yourself doing, but that would be a weird question to ask a band, for example, or people who put together movies or plays. The collectivity is kind of like more germane, I guess. I don't know if people treat it like it's normal to collaborate, not like, okay, all of this collective work and negotiation and communication happens, and then at the end we put like one person out in the front and say, they did all of this, and they conceptualized all of this, and they're the reason it exists, and they're the only reason it matters. So I guess it feels normal. We just feel like a band, and like bands have to know like what this person is going to do in relation to what they're going to do. Like, it's already there, I guess.
Yeah, one of our favorite collaborative duos that we kind of were really inspired by in the beginning was Marina Abramovich and Ule. And sort of like how they work together, and obviously that didn't work out very well by the end. But the way that they kind of like built off each other, and even like, I don't know, I feel like they had like a real connection where they were really trying to make these works from some collective place, and I don't know. No.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
No. I'm just like, it's like I'll talk about reality TV all day, but admitting that like I care about like Marina Abramovich. Like,
That's too much. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
We also sometimes joke that we are two halves of an artist standing in a very tall coat.
That's only when we teach
But
together.
that's for teaching, really. But I feel like that when I'm not teaching also. So that's for me. That's how I feel.
In the back. Oh, and Lexi.
I'm going to go first. Okay, so I have so many questions, but I'll go with this one, which is I really liked how in the presentation there were like, you would go through images fast and then go backwards and then go to clips and come back, and it was making me feel a way that I feel in the performance documentation around a kind of a loop and a return and then a progression and then a coming back, and that was really just fun. And when you were like, I'm not going to play the glacier again, but the glacier kind of kept erupting into the space. So that was just like a nice like kind of experience temporally that I was having in the presentation, and it made me wonder how you experience time within performance, like for each of you, and I'm sure it changes performance to performance. But I was like, I wonder what time you each are in and kind of together are in. While you're performing, because it can be so, I don't know, like it can just like really stretch and also really kind of like quicken.
And this is definitely two different answers.
Go for it.
Okay, two things. I think I'd have to go talk to somebody about this, but I've heard this concept of, I don't really like the phrase, because it like makes a metaphor of a real condition, but like time blindness, I think I have that, so I'm not very, like, I can't take a chunk of time and it be the same chunk of time every time. Does that make sense? Like an hour is a different length each time I think about an hour or live an hour. But also, like, in the performances, there's this, what's the writer? Mahali Csikszentmihalyi, I think, wrote this book called Flow. And Jackie, I think you might know this. But, like, he talks about, like this kind of place that any person doing anything can enter, where they don't think of themselves as a person and there's a task, like they just kind of are the task. So time isn't really, if it's a factor at all, it barely matters. it just kind of isn't there. So I know we kind of definitely find ourselves in flow a lot when we're performing. But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think time dilates. So like when I'm in a performance, it's like if you've ever seen like an action movie where someone can move really, really fast, but when they're moving really, really fast, time actually slows down. It feels like that for me.
I can verify that. It's scary.
Hi, thank you for your lecture. I had a question kind of related to something you'd mentioned earlier about collaboration and kind of the contemporary art world. I'm curious, as like an artist duo, kind of like resisting the mythology of like a singular artist, especially with performance being in an inherently collaborative form, if there are spaces that you go to either in your collaboration with Scratch or as solo artists that feel like your work finds its home, like do you gravitate towards more hybridized like performance venues, art spaces? Because I'm just thinking about like the club as a collective space, and then like a white cube gallery, and how you, if you come into like conflict, kind of working in art spaces, like capital A art spaces with art practice that's collaborative.
I don't think we've ever collectively performed in a white cube space, right? Have we? Oh, okay, no, once we did.
Where?
Here, Locke's Gallery.
Locke's. Yeah.
That was because artists brought us in, and they were doing, can you remember, Matt Sweeb and Nadia Hironaka. They brought us in for a show that they did there. And so because we were brought in, I think we didn't have to negotiate much with the gallery ourselves. That was sort of negotiated on our behalf. I think in general, like white cube spaces are spaces you have to negotiate with, right? One thing I did think was really funny is that the green room was where they kept all the paintings, and so I felt like a painting for the day. So that was odd. But generally in spaces that aren't a white cube, they sort of like want us to do what we do, so we don't really experience too much friction.
Yeah, I think I would say that, again, because we were never intentionally like we weren't submitting Scratch to a lot of those kinds of things. We were mostly like warehouse, non-traditional space, what have you. And slowly that has changed, and you get to be in a dome, but a dome is not inside PS1.
That's the thing that we're negotiating right now, is like how do we let people sort of like present it more as like visual art, so like making sculptures for this last piece. And this summer we were at Skohegan, Gordon Hall talked about refusing to perform without being able to put up an installation and put up objects. And so that's how you kind of like get the objects to speak for you a bit. So that's something we're negotiating with art spaces at the moment.
Yeah,
right?
It's not that we don't want to leave something in a room when we're not there. It's just that there was a lot we could get out of a time-based, like shared space experience with Scratch. Yeah.
Hi. This is like maybe like a music nerd tech question, which I know like in experimental performance or music spaces, there's a lot of that could circulate. And so I guess I'm like, an easy question is around like nerding out over gear and questions about maybe to not use the word nerd, like technical language, like you used score to describe the performance scores. And so I guess I'm also wondering, within the discipline of experimental music and the technical language used to describe compositional techniques, if you venture into languaging, like your work, or diving into like situating the compositions that way, through, yeah, like more music composition disciplines.
No, but there is something where, like, when I use my Mother 32, I have to write down all of my patches. So, like, that's something, or like, even recently we started writing like live parts from Mother 32, where it's like I'm writing down all these notes on how to do it again, because I'm notoriously bad at recreating a sound twice. So that's something, and then I think that's pretty much it with that,
See,
right?
this is kind of the question that the style of question I told y'all not to ask. Only because like I'm like I remember like the beginning of it and the like end of it a little bit, and I think I get the question, but I like.
Do
right?
we make music?
Do we make music compositions? Is that the question? Yeah, maybe like. Or do we perform it in like experimental music context? I'm like. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because yeah, we have, can, and do perform in like experimental music context. If that's the question, like, yeah, it's not always like an art space. It's not always a performance art context. Sometimes it's like a music festival or something. Yeah.
No, I had a question. A more simple gear question. What's your favorite kind of gear to use when you're performing? What's a go-to instrument for both of you? You were talking a little bit about your Moog, but yeah, what are some of the staples?
Staple. Weirdly, well, that's not that weird now, but CDJs. It's weird. I say weird because they're not a very accessible instrument. Most people I know who use or have used CDJs to perform learned when they got gigs at venues that had CDJs. But yeah, we consider ourselves like little cousins of like a generation of like visual artists and musicians who very much treat a CDJ like an instrument. So for me, that's my answer. It's like I really like and love CDJs. Yeah.
I just got a TC Helicon FX, like vocal FX processor, and I'm obsessed with it. I showed it in the July 4th performance, and I can like chop up my voice and do all these other things. I think that's like my favorite outside of my Moog, which I do love a lot too. So I'm torn. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you take
Yeah, okay.